Alright, I'm fix and flip. This time, instead of doing a whole car, we're going to do just a motor. I happen to get a 2.2 ecotec out of a 2008 Chevy Cobalt. This is what we have of the motor so right now. Crankcase and the oil pan. Got the head, pretty much complete head with the exhaust manifold still on, valve cover gasket, alternator, and I also have the throttle body and the plastic intake. So I'm pretty much going to rebuild this and try to sell it after the rebuild. Originally got the car, pretty much knew the motor, something in the motor was pretty much shot, had a pretty bad rod knot going on. It was the piston closest to the timing chain spun a bearing, cracked it open, bearing was completely gone, and it had worn the crankshaft down to the point where I can't find a bearing that will make up for the size difference. It's wore down so bad. It's like 4 or 5 thousandths undersized bearing that it would need. And then when I was checking the rest, crank's pretty tore up. So I'm just going to throw new crank and bearings in there, possibly pistons. I'm going to pull them out and make sure the rod on that first piston wasn't dinged up or anything bad with it. So if that piston's bad, I'm just going to buy all new piston set for it, and I'll just throw that in the selling price for it. Pretty much going to walk you through, show you the before and afters as I clean everything and put it back together. Seems how I'm sitting here and, you know, got the statewide shutdown going on, so nobody's really wanting to buy cars, so this is what I'm stuck in my garage doing. The head itself looks like it's in good shape. Cams and everything, I don't think I'm going to have to really replace anything. I did some of the cleaning, clean the gasket off already. I might get down in there and replace everything. I'll know once I go to clean. Look at the underside a little better. Got the whole, not this one, this is off a different ecotec, not the new gasket set. Head gasket, head bolts. This head gasket that came out of a Malibu a long time ago. Okay, now on the motor rebuild, I decided that I'm going to put a different crank in it. I was going to go brand new, but as you can see, the Chevy dealer wants around $350 for one. So I jumped on eBay. They're around the same price for a brand new one, between $300 and $400. I wanted to show you guys things like this. This one says for an ecotec 2.2 2008 Chevy Cobalt. Exact car I'm working on, and I checked for $175, and I checked it out, and it's not even the right crankshaft. So these, you gotta watch for that. Sometimes people are selling parts like this, they're not sure exactly what they are, but it's definitely the wrong crankshaft. So I'm gonna go for this one right here. I found 0708 Cobalt 2.2. It's used for $90. It's used, but you're never gonna know the difference. You clean it up, put new bearings and stuff on it. As long as all the journals are, you know, they're not scuffed up or nothing, just polish them and all that good stuff. Thought I'd show you guys that part to remind you to always double and triple check, not just your part numbers, but if you're going online, actually look at the pictures, because the part numbers in their description match, but the pictures, I'm not even sure where this crankshaft really came off from. Alright, so here's the crankshaft that I'm going to go with, the used one. It's pretty much the only used one I could find on eBay right now. I didn't check Amazon or anything. So I got the crankshaft, I got the head gasket set, and I got some piston rings. I went back and looked at that rod again, and it's definitely doable after I sand it and polish it. So I just went ahead and got the rings, compression rings and rings, and some main bearings. The rest of the bearings I'm just going to pick up from the part store because they're cheaper. So with everything that you really need to rebuild your motor, and it'd be even cheaper if you didn't need a crankshaft, you'd probably put the money in elsewhere in other bearings and things like that. This motor doesn't need, it has it uses a gasket maker for the oil pan and the crankcase, so that's a plus. So $230 is pretty much going to be the final price, but for me, I already got this head gasket set right here that I showed earlier in the video. I just wanted to show it to you guys. It's pretty cheap for a head gasket set. So for under 200 bucks, I'm gonna have all the parts I need to get the motor ready to be put back in. So definitely check out eBay if you're doing the same thing before you go to the dealer. Alright, back in the garage. So now that we have parts on the way, go ahead and start cleaning and getting everything ready for reassembly. I went ahead and took the pistons all the way out, and I just put the caps on each, right back where I took them off on each one. If you didn't know on a piston, how you know when you're putting the cap back on, there's these little kind of like divot points, like on the piston rod and the cap, and you just line those up. That's how you know you put it back on the same way it came off. That way when you go to put them back on, the bearings crush right and all that good stuff. Alright, so this is where we're at. I went ahead and put it up on the motor stand to start the cleaning. Get it off the floor. Got the new crank in the mail today. It's the old one. It's the new one. New one's definitely in a lot better shape. This is the one right here that was bad. I don't know if you can't really see it on the camera, but you can kind of see the color difference. It's pretty much not fixable, and if it, or maybe if you send it to a shop, but I'm just gonna go ahead and throw it in the scrap pile. Clean this up. Throw the bearings on there. If you remember earlier in the video at the beginning, this motor had spun a rod bearing, and it was completely gone. It was off the actual piston rod. But as I was cleaning this on the other side, in the where the oil filter goes, I started right here in the oil filter. I started finding little metal shavings. So it was in there. It was just pretty much just demolished. So I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I clean out every single last port and everything out of there. So once I get the crank in there and the rest of the crankcase cleaned up, I will go ahead and pick it up from there and show you the rest. Alright, here we are with the bearings. Pretty much just remember that you don't want to put no oil on the bottom side of them, just the top part that's facing up, and they're pretty easy to put in. Just line up, there's a little notch. You'll see it, the notch matches the notch on the actual crank or crankcase, whatever this thing is. Line them up, they just kind of snap in. And if you miss a little bit, it's not a big deal. They slide it around. Just make sure each side is as flush as possible. you don't want to get your fingerprints on the actual surface of the bearing, because the oils on your hand will push oil away. Motor oil will get pushed away by the oil on your fingers. So even if you wear gloves, I like to still spray it down with some brake clean, and make sure you use your assembly lube, because you don't want to get that dry start when you go to use the motor and spin a bearing right away. And in my case, I have no idea how long this motor is going to sit on this motor stand, because as of right now I don't have a vehicle to put it in. So until I find one, or somebody just buys the motor from me, it will be sitting. And I really don't want to sell it and then call me up like, yeah, I spun bearing as soon as I started it. Anyways, it's pretty easy. Just do the process on both sides, top and bottom. And then there's this one on this motor, it's the second one over from the timing chain, and it looks different because the sides make it for when the crank don't slide back and forth. It goes in just like the rest of them. Alright, so once you get this far, get everything cleaned up, you put your silicone on there for your gasket. In case you was wondering where it goes, you just follow that line basically. Put a nice thick bead on there all the way around that line before you go ahead and put it together. Alright, I went ahead and got the lower crankcase put back together. When you go to torque it down, the inside bolts are 15 foot-pounds and an additional 70 degrees. And the outside 10 are just 18 foot-pounds. And before you put this on, and before you do the silicone, don't forget to make sure your oil clearance is good. And I haven't done the pistons yet. I just got the rings in. What I'm going to have to do is turn the motor over, put the pistons in through the top, and then make sure the oil clearance is good and bolt them up. Once I get them in there, I'll show you guys the torque. Okay, here we are with the pistons in and torque down. When you put your new rings on there and pistons, make sure you get everything nice and oily with whatever weight oil it is that the motor you're doing calls for. Make sure them rings are nice and soaked. The torque on this was 18 foot-pounds for the caps, plus additional 100 degrees. Remember, 100 degrees is not 360, so remember it's not a full circle. Now I'm going to go ahead and flip it over and start on the head and the head gasket. Before you do that, make sure you spin it around a few times, make sure nothing weird is going on. I like to get everything covered in oil on the inside. That way, there's, like I said, I don't know how long this motor is going to sit. I don't want any chance of rust or anything like that seizing up on me. Alright, here we are with the surface cleaned and the head gasket sitting on here. You really want to be kind of tedious with the head gasket surface when you're cleaning it. Make sure you do whatever technique you normally do to get it nice and shiny. And then once I put the head gasket on, I still like to go spray some brake cleaner on a cloth and wipe the oil off of anywhere I touch on the gasket itself with my fingers. Next step is to put the head on. Alright, here we are with the head sitting on here. It's not bolted down or torqued down yet. Go ahead and tell you guys that if you're going to do anything with your cams, make sure you take your time, check your oil clearances, and when you take these caps off, make sure you put them back right where you got them. Of course, you're going to have to replace your sprockets here, even though mine are still the old ones on there. I'm waiting for the timing chain set. When it comes to the 10 head bolts themselves, it's going to be 22 foot-pounds, and then an additional 155 degrees on the big ones, and then the little ones are just 25 foot-pounds, and I'll show you guys the tightening sequence for the big head bolts. Once you get to the timing chain portion and put your new sprockets on there, them bolts are going to be 2 steps, 63 foot-pounds, and then another 30 degrees, and that's for both of those. Once I get this torque down, I'm going to start kind of jump back and forth from taking the exhaust manifold off so I can clean that gasket up and put the new gasket on. It looks something like this when you get yours. And then first thing you're gonna need is a 1/2 inch socket or wrench, and go ahead and take your heat shield off. It's a lot easier without the car, obviously, but at least you have an idea where the bolts are at. Looks like there is just gonna be 3 for the heat shield. And then the one down here is pretty much always gonna be rusted, unless you got a very low miles motor that you're working with. Pretty sure my socket's gonna be stuck to that one. Try to get it off. Three bolts and it comes right off. Looks like you're gonna have 12 bolts holding it on. I think maybe 13, but it looks like I might be missing one. They're all 1/2 inch as well. If you're wanting to know the torque to put these nuts back on, it's 106 inch-pounds to put these nuts back on, if you're picky about the torque when it comes to these. Once you have the 3 bolts off, mine wasn't on there very hard, but it just pulls right off like this. And then on the water pump side, should be able to pop it right out. Just like that. It's just a little rubber seal on there. In my case, since the timing chain's not on, this pops right off. And start on the bolts on the back. There's some 10 millimeters and it looks like two 1/2 inch bolts. So I'll go ahead and take those off. Alright, here it is with all the bolts off. Comes right off. Here's the old one. Now if you're like me and get all the bolts off and it still won't come off, there's a hidden bolt up here in the top corner that you actually take off on the front of the motor, right up here next to your motor mount bracket right here. There's 1/2 inch that goes all the way through. Here we are with the water pump on. The whole side of the motor got cleaned and painted. Got the thermostat housing all cleaned up and painted. Turned out great. Water pump's on there. Brand new. Looks great. Got the front on there, that gear. Pretty easy process. Imagine it'd be pretty easy even if you're still doing it while it's in the car, especially if you got some kind of good tool going for that gear in the front.